the immense and brooding spirit still shall quicken and control. Living, he was the land, and dead, his soul shall be her soul.
We are here this morning to pay tribute to Dr. Douglas Baker. Those of us present, although few according to his wishes, represent the many worldwide whose lives have been touched and altered by this extraordinary man. A man whose entire life was one of service and sacrifice for others. Losing his father at the age of 8, looking after his mother, dying of cancer at the age of 16, while still at school, then volunteering with the Natal Mounted Rifles to fight for king and country in World War II the same year, this was typical of Douglas's commitment of service and sacrifice. Even though seriously wounded during World War II and on the dangerously ill list with only one functioning lung, he chose to return to the front line and fight again with his comrades rather than return to the safety of home life. After the war, instructed by the English master to do medicine, he went through 7 exhaustive years, completing his medical degrees at the age of 42. After a short time in practice, under the guillotine of the orthodoxy, he was instructed again 2 years later by the same master not to register and no longer practice, but to pursue a far greater task, to change the climate of thinking on the planet by lecturing and teaching the ancient wisdom which he was equipped to do in the language of the day. He was a torch-bearer and a Pied Piper for so many who followed his theosophical teachings he gave freely. His professor of English, Elizabeth Snedden, said even at a very early age, Douglas had a magical use of language which could bring out the potential from the youngest child to the oldest veteran. He expressed his divine gift of esoteric knowledge and impeccable use of English language by giving over 10,000 lectures around the globe from the early 50s continually until last year. His international festivals of yoga and esoteric sciences, beginning in 1958, continued throughout his life. He authored nearly 100 books, and in 2005 he penned his autobiography, War, Wine, and Valor, which became respected by leaders of the nation, acknowledged by the Queen, and preserved for all time in the Royal Library at Windsor Castle. This was followed shortly, in 2010, by Cannon Fodder, recording his early childhood before the war. And even at the age of 86, with failing health and only one lung, on the interest of an aging friend going blind who wished he could read his story, Douglas spent exhaustive hours and weeks struggling through the reading of his autobiography of some 500 pages, now recorded for posterity. In 2008, and for 2.5 years, he gave regular interviews of his war experiences on the front line at his home at Little Elephant for the archivist from the Imperial War Museum, completing his task only last week by donating the little diaries he had kept during the war years to the museum. And even in later days, his bedside dictations of important and esoteric and challenging information will help others struggling to express their creative potential and give understanding to the meaning of life. Douglas, although we are few, but many, we will carry on your work, your vision, and your legacy, and complete the projects and seed thoughts you plant it in us. Your ideas will have legs, which will support us in our work ahead.
Tell us how it happened, O Father.
The Assyrian came down like a wolf on the fold. His cohorts were gleaming in purple and gold, and the sheen of their spears was like stars on the sea, where the waves roll nightly on deep Galilee. Like the leaves of the forest when summer is green, that host with their banners at sunset were seen. Like the leaves of the forest when autumn is blown, that host on the morrow lay withered and strown. For the angel of death spread his wings on the blast, and breathed in the face of the foe as he passed. And the eyes of the sleepers waxed deadly and chill, and their hearts but once heaved and forever grew still. And there lay the steed with his nostrils all wide, but through it there rolled not the breath of his pride. And the foam of the gasping lay white on the turf, as cold as the spray of the rock-beating surf. And there lay the rider, distorted and pale, with the dew on his brow and the rust on his mail. And the tents were all silent, the banners alone, the lances unlifted, the trumpet unblown. And the widows of Ashur are loud in their wail, and their idols are broke in the temples of Baal, and the might of the Gentile, unsmote by the sword, hath melted like snow in the glance of the Lord. We are the music makers, and we are the dreamers of dreams, wandering by lone sea breakers and sitting by desolate streams, world losers and world forsakers, on whom the pale moon gleams. Yet we are the movers and shakers of the world, forever it seems. We in the ages lying in the buried past of the earth, built Nineveh with our sighing, and Babel itself with our mirth, and o'erthrew them with prophesying to the old of the new world's worth. For each age is a dream that is dying, or one that is coming to birth. Just return these plans to the architect. The extension is too small, much too small.
Sir.
I want a wing to house an emperor, not a cart horse.
Yes, sir. Sir, there's a courier coming.
I want galleries to display the art treasures of Europe, not drafty passages that give me gout.
Sir.
And I want gardens that are properly laid out, not a collection of dung heaps and mounds.
Yes, sir.
The emperor is expected here in 2 years' time. Nothing's ready, nothing.
Kaldheim, sir. Captain Baldheim. Imperial courier. I have dispatches for you.
You have ridden from Munich?
Through the night, sir.
Do you know what is in these dispatches?
No, sir. But I presume it's news from the Italian front. That always comes through Munich. No doubt Bourbon has reached Orvieto, or perhaps Viterbo. He's an excitable Frenchman. They're all the same. Give them a little wine and they go berserk. You put our German lads under one of them and don't pay them, well, anything can happen.
It has, Captain, it has. Rome fell 3 days ago. Even now, 15,000 Germans, our own imperial forces, are sacking the city.
Oh, Mary, how could you know so soon?
My dear Captain, if the Sultan of Baghdad could keep homing pigeons 300 years ago, and the Egyptians 2,000 years before that, I think the banking house of Fugger can manage it in this enlightened age.
Bourbon must be mad.
Bourbon, Captain, is dead. Died in the attack.
And may the Lord protect His Holiness the Pope from that rabble.
Yes, and my estate's there. The Pope has escaped. He's in the castle of St. Angelo. Captain, go to the house steward and refresh yourself. Then come and see me in the counting house. I shall have dispatches for you.
That I will, sir.
I sat for many days at dawn, wherever I was, meditating on the banks of the Nile, watching the sun rise across the expanse of the river, and again, in the coolness of the evening, watching it set. I had never known such peace and the sweetness of just being. Still, to this day, in quietness, I can recreate on the screen of my mind the rising red gold disk of the sun and draw sustenance from it.
I watched you do the same at Rhodes. I wondered where you drew your strength from.
Indeed. And in the evening I place the warm glow of the setting sun in its proper place, between the eyebrows. And once more, I am sustained by it.
If then I be single, thy whole body shall be filled with light. Theophrastus, let us do it now. Meditate together. Show me.
O thou, who givest sustenance to the universe, from whom all things proceed, to whom all things return, unveil to us the face of the true spiritual sun, hidden by a disk of golden light, that we may know the truth and do our whole duty as we journey to thy sacred feet.
Dr. Baker, I'm impressed by your imposing array of famous people believing in reincarnation, but many find the subject implausible.
Implausible? How do you mean?
Well, for instance, they might ask, how do we survive the grave?
Well, there's a variety of evidence coming forward. There is, for instance, new developments in medicine, which indicate that more and more people are surviving the grave in terms of what we call clinical death.
What do you actually mean by clinical death?
By clinical death, we mean that a person may have, for instance, a heart attack. His heart stops beating. Cardiac output ceases. He is anoxic. He has no pulses. He has no brain waves. The pupils won't dilate.
You mean, then, that for several minutes he's virtually dead?
Yes, you could say that he is literally dead and would be carted away to the morgue, but for modern methods of resuscitation. And in these methods of resuscitation, the patient may have an extraordinary experience in consciousness.
How are people resuscitated?
Usually this is by injection. By injection we mean the injection of adrenaline into the heart muscle. A few moments after it is injected into the heart muscle, the heart begins to beat again. And then life is restored to the individual. The other way today is through electrical discharge on the chest wall. A shock is discharged into the heart muscle through the chest wall, and this affects the pacemaker. The heart begins to beat again, and life is again restored.
Are you suggesting, then, that they have some sort of conscious experience while they're dead?
I'm suggesting just that whilst they are in a state of clinical death, before they are brought back to life, they very frequently have an altered state of consciousness. They might find themselves out of the body. This was the experience of my friend Peter Sellers, who found himself out of the body during a state of clinical death which he suffered in a Los Angeles clinic in 1964. Whilst they were resuscitating him, he said that he left his body and he found himself in another world that he could touch and taste and see into with as much reality as this one.
It is one of the oldest of mankind's beliefs that we are reborn again and again in this world until we finally get it right. But our Coronation Street star here, William Roach, thinks that if we knew the truth of reincarnation, we'd value life a little more and fear death a little less. Here, fresh from filming on the street, is his Sunday stand.
Reincarnation is real, so we should have no fear of death. Life is too unfair for reincarnation not to be true. I mean, if there's only one life, where is the fairness? Where one child is born into poverty in war-stricken Ethiopia, and another is born into luxury to an American millionaire. We're spiritual beings from the spiritual realms, and we come here to inhabit a body. When that body dies, our spirit returns to the spiritual realms, and this process is repeated many, many times. The earth on which we live is a school, and the purpose of this life is to learn some of its many lessons. We're here to learn, amongst other things, the difference between right and wrong. And if we do, we become kinder, healthier, and happier. And this journey called life, dying is just the end of one part of this ongoing process. I may not like the actual act of dying, but I look forward to the release, to the going home. It'll be like walking out of a smoke-filled room into the fresh air. Everybody is on a spiritual journey, whether they know it or not. But if we could all have a true and full understanding of the principles of reincarnation, the world would be a much happier place.
Dr. Baker, whose esoteric teachings will forever continue to resonate through the work of his Claregate group, often made reference to the Anima Mundi, the soul of the world that permeates all of nature. He stated that its signature is branded throughout creation, from the great macrocosm right down to a single cell, thus maintaining a continuum. This continuum is described as the fourth postulate of ancient wisdom in Theosophy. Dr. Baker wrote down his reflections on the impact of this divine continuum during his lifetime through the poetic lines that he has written, which go as follows. I've glimpsed my share of heaven and hell from the unkept highways of my own mind. My fish-like feet have felt the snares and tugs of 1,000 lives along the tortured way. Now shot of Piscean shoe and shod with soul, they feel the pulse of earth crammed with heaven, and every common bush afire with God. The Anima Mundi, heavenly dew, staring from every eye, glowing from every hue. Her staffs are not sacred wrought, firstborn's plating, plied with neural, prod my back with ceaseless urge, and grew the vehicle tongues of sensory scourge. Sweet pain of the entwining snakes, life's prop, that drove and flogged me to the mountain top. These lines were a symbolic representation of everything that Dr. Baker stood for, and that was summed up for me during a moment of somber reflection that he shared. One time I handed him a copy of his lines, and I asked him for a possible title. He took it from my hand, and in a calm way adjusted his spectacles. As he started reading it, his facial expression changed into a somber one, and in deep silence that seemed to go on forever, he became consumed in the essence of the lines that he himself had written. Although I have been most fortunate indeed to share such a personal moment in his life, I felt that that moment should have been shared by all. And it can still be so if only the essence of these poetic lines would eventually become branded in the consciousness of every group member and serve as a fitting tribute in memory of their author, Dr. Douglas Baker. DB, thank you for your life.
You and I possess, as you well know, not only a physical body, but an etheric counterpart to the physical body, made up of subatomic particles, mainly what we call neutrinos, but many other subatomic particles as well. And this is the province of the yogi who knows very well that in the atmosphere of our planet there is trapped during sunlit periods the energy of prana, and that it is possible by breathing steadily to take this prana in and circulate it around this etheric body. The function of the etheric body is to vitalize the nervous system. The two great cerebral hemispheres which make up the brain and spinal cord are vitalized by this prana. Fascinating as that subject is, and the whole science of yoga which expresses it, we're not concerned with the etheric body today. What we are concerned with is a subtler substance still. Atoms, particles, wavicles, if you like to call them, of what we today refer to as quantum. By that we mean energy units perhaps 1,000,000,000 times tinier than an atom. These are being encountered by science today in the field of quantum. Well, we know by the same observation, which we call reading the Akashic records, that this very, very tenuous matter, emotional matter, astral substance, if you like, is the matter of the astral world. We have an astral body made up of emotional substance interpenetrating the physical. Unlike the etheric body, the astral body can be detached from the physical and may be moved away from it. Millions of people are beginning to have an out-of-body experience in which the consciousness leaves the physical body behind in an astral envelope and can operate in an astral world. And that is what we're mainly concerned with here today, is the nature of the astral world and its contents. We say that our own little physical globe called the Earth, with its continents, that this globe is only the dense physical body of a much greater complex. We say that interpenetrating the Earth is the Anima Mundi of the Earth, an etheric envelope, very like the etheric body of man interpenetrates his body. But we're concerned today with the astral world, a world of emotional substance which is immense. And the astral world is so great that it reaches almost as far as the moon in extent. Many, many thousands of times the volume of the physical body of the Earth. Now, the astral world is mainly created by us. We are the emotional content of the Earth globe. We are capable of generating emotional energy which can be laid down in emotional or astral substance way out into the astral world. As we express ourselves emotionally, we draw energy from the astral world through a chakra or force center that lies just below the diaphragm. We then take the emotional energy and we express it out of us in emotional confrontations, if you like, anger, sorrow, joy, and so on. And in so doing, we give off an effluent of this emotional used up material. And this material is collective, all mankind generates it, and it pours from the astral body into the astral world, exerting, as it were, a pressure or kind of atmosphere way out there in this immense globe, which is the astral world. The astral world is thrown into compartments, each with its own scenario. The scenario is often very reflective of the kind of emotional and physical life that you live on the earth. Somewhere in the astral world there is a compartment that vibrates just to your aura, and when you leave the physical body in sleep, your astral body will tend to find itself in a particular compartment. Again, we're not concerned too much with the subject of out-of-body experience here today. We're looking for records, and the records exist in this astral world. The emotional experiences, especially when there are a group of humans involved in an actual traumatic experience, a festival, a happy experience of intense emotional effusion, then that record of the event is able to move out into the astral world. It will locate itself in an appropriate scenario, and there you have a record of that event. We call that the Akashic record of the event. The truth is that mankind has got a memory, and it is embedded in the astral world in these records.
Dr. Douglas Baker is a known academic on the subject of astral projection. Can you elaborate on what purpose astral projection serves?
Astral projection is a phenomenon associated with consciousness. We say, those who accept astral projection, that you are where your consciousness is. Science will say that you are where your body is. So that's the distinct difference. Most people have an out-of-body experience during their night's sleep. By that we mean that in an astral form, made of emotional substance, the astral body moves away from the physical and enters the astral world. Most people, however, are not aware of being out of the body because of the depth of sleep that they enter. But if you can lighten the sleep and undertake certain disciplines, it is possible to become aware that you are in an astral world, not a dream. And being in the astral world, you can then move yourself around.
On the program today is Dr. Douglas Baker. I couldn't even carry all of the books. If they had brought me a library of his books, I would have had to ask for like 10 people to help. These are just a very few of his books: The Opening of the Third Eye, Super Consciousness Through Meditation, this book, Theory and Practice of Meditation, Esoteric Healing, Jewel in the Lotus. Let us welcome Dr. Baker to our program right now. Hello there.
Hello.
Thank you so much for being here.
It's a pleasure.
I was so taken by the amount of information you have out. Are you constantly writing? Are you constantly reading? What do you do?
I open the gates of the higher consciousness, and it streams in. You have to undertake certain disciplines, but through this space here, we call it a screen, it is possible for the higher self to project onto the screen of the sacred square inch here the kind of information that I'm talking about.
You know, there are people, though, who they play in the energy so much and their third eye opens very quickly for them and they just don't know what to do with that, and sometimes it frightens them, or all of that Talk to us just a little bit about the third eye.
Well, you see, the third eye is not a chakra. You're indicating that there are 4 centers here which open. The third eye is the blending of 3 very, very powerful centers in the head. One which the yogis call ajna, between the eyebrows, another one which rotates sagittally between the angles of the jawbone here, and a third one, the most important spiritually, is the Sahasrara. The yogis call it the crowning glory of man, and it's like an inverted flower on the top of the head. Now, if these 3 are brought into manifestation, are aroused, and blend with each other while they are being aroused, then everything is safe. It's when people stimulate one of these chakras, usually unknowingly. For instance, the alcoholic who indulges in too much alcohol very frequently can open this chakra up. And it opens up abnormally because it isn't integrated with the other 2 that I described. And then you get delirium tremens, where the ajna center is opened in a distorted way. And that is the cause of most of the problems you were just describing.
I can't tell you what an honor it is to meet you today.
Thank you.
And to have you share just even such a tiny little drop of the information you know with our viewers.
And thank you for your courtesy.
Oh, it's easy, very easy with a person like yourself. Thank you, Dr. Baker.
The intention is that those who exercise this esoteric astrological key will be fed with return what we call lucograms, light pictures, which are registered here, and here being the sacred square inch between the eyebrows. And here is cleared through meditation. And this is part of a meditatory process in which an aspect is taken out of a horoscope. For instance, let us say Mars in Taurus in the 6th. 3 glyphs there, part of a greater combination, extracted from the horoscope, placed in the spiritual diary, heading a page, a clean page, and through the process of meditation and invocation, which we all have to learn if we want to make spiritual progress, it is possible, it is not only possible and feasible, but it works. And what works is that aspect from the horoscope is propositioned to the higher self, which is what the spiritual diary is always directed to. And through the use of this archetype, and through the effectiveness of the angelic hosts involved, you get back a word picture, a lucigram, a picture which is of light, and it is registered there. And the moment that you proposition an aspect from a horoscope, including your own, of course, there will come through to you when you are in a receptive state, either in meditation or in the process of going to sleep, which we call hypnagogia, or in the process of awakening, which we call hypnopompia. In these states of being, or in light sleep, it is possible for an answer to be given to the aspect that you have taken from a horoscope and proposition. The aspect may be 14, 24 glyphs, an enormous aspect like a grand triangle, or a fixed cross from a horoscope can be propositioned to the higher self, and it is fed back to you in light pictures. This means that the person is effectively brought into contact with his ashram, with the center of his consciousness, as that center must be focused on the higher self. An ashram contains the higher selves of a group of its members wherever they are. The morphology of the Libran glyph suggests a bird in flight with wings widespread. Libra in the house of Scorpio, the 8th, is the aspect for the eagle and the falcon. The eagle is a common symbol used in aggressive nations like Germany, the USA, and Russia, which is why it draws in qualities of Scorpio. Gerard Manley Hopkins, the poet, gives us a wonderful description of the falcon. I caught this morning morning's minion, kingdom of daylight's dauphin, dapple dawn-drawn falcon. In his riding of the rolling level, underneath him steady air, and striding high there, how he rung upon the rein of a wimpling wing in his ecstasy. Then off forth on swing, as a skate's heels sweep smooth on a bow bend. The hurl and gliding rebuffed the big wind. My heart in hiding stirred for a bird, the achieve of, the mastery of the thing. Aries rules superlatives, and without our usual recourse to the superlatives of much and many, Milton, in his epic Paradise Lost, stuns us with his cosmological descriptions of heaven and hell. He spake, and to confirm his words, out flew millions of flaming swords, drawn from the thighs of mighty cherubim. The sudden blaze far round illumined hell. Highly they raged against the highest, and fierce with grasped arms clashed on their sounding shields the din of war, hurling defiance towards the vault of heaven. The delight of this narrative is enhanced by identifying the epic course of man himself with the fall of the devil, for it is man who is the hero of the piece. Epic means heroic, classic, Homeric, historic on a grand scale, and these are found in Aries and its house, the first. The medieval period falls under Cancer. So does death, and death comes in many ways. It did so devastatingly in medieval times, and was symbolized by the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, who brought death through the great scourges of the day: war, famine, pestilence, and death. The last 3 fall under the rulership of Cancer. We associate dying with some historic figures. Socrates drinking the hemlock. Caesar assassinated by plotters in the Senate on the Ides of March. Thomas More executed for loyalty to his faith on Tower Hill. Charles I for treason in Whitehall. The Frenchman Marat murdered in his bath. Nelson aboard the Victory at Trafalgar. Mussolini at the hands of the guerrillas, hair strung up by the feet in Milan. And more recently, Princess Diana in a car accident at high speed. Today, the manner of dying can still horrify, especially when a ferry boat is involved, and masses meet their end, or a funereal comment in bugles playing the last post for those comrades killed in combat. Capricorn rules mountains, individual mountains, often associated with religious, sacred and mystical allusion. Fujiyama is one example of a mountain linked ultimately to the religious and mystical life of Japan. Mount Olympus was believed by the Greeks to be the home of their gods and legendary figures like the sacred horse Pegasus. Capricorn rules systems. Earth in Capricorn is the geocentric system of Ptolemy just described, which is still used for convenience in orthodox astrology to this day. Sun in Capricorn, on the other hand, is the heliocentric system of Copernicus. Our own school of astrology uses both systems, a blending of modern and ancient astrology, which gives astrological interpretation and prediction its astonishing accuracy. To the spiritually ambitious, the rounds of Saturn suggest increasing levels of consciousness, of initiation, the ultimate reward for persistence and patience. The surprising denouement of the sign of Capricorn is the integration of personality, the infusion of spirituality, and the sacrifice of the resulting psychosynthesized novitiate to the divine intent. This gilded bronze relief of the climaxing feature of this dramatic integrating Capricornian process shows Abraham, symbolizing the higher self, taking Isaac, the integrated personality, up the mountain of initiation to sacrifice him there for whatever God's purpose intends. Abraham and Isaac saddle up the ass for the journey, and the Capricornian denouement, the preparation to sacrifice Isaac, with a finale of divine intervention in the form of an interceding angel. This dramatic scenario of the final stages of spiritual ascent is a fitting tribute to the hard-won rewards of sorrow and suffering inherent in the sign of Capricorn and its ruling planet, Saturn.
DB's own observations. Christ, the fisher of men, locates and fishes out the souls of all men enmeshed in the waters of materialism. As a matter of interest, DB asked the Master RB how he interpreted the symbol opposite. It is a symbol of spiritual awakening. Most men are half asleep spiritually and cannot rise above the waters of materialism. If they did, they would behold a whole new world awaiting their exploration.
I have a question. What about the years 2012?
2012 is very important for Great Britain because the Olympics will be somewhere else than in the world. It will be in Britain.
What's about the secret geometry?
The future of geometry rests in a renaissance of ancient wisdom's understanding of geometry. The geometry of ancient wisdom came from the Greek philosophers, because if it is established, then it means that the age of man is extended. We have to get used to long periods in which there seems little to happen, but in which the soul is beginning to stir within us and is beginning to express itself appropriately. It is the age in which patriarchism is beginning to emerge again. Patriarchism enabled the Bible to flourish for thousands of years, true parts of it as well as false parts of it. And with the age of the patriarchs, the coming again of the patriarchs, we're going to have the wisdom of some of the aged being able to persist so that their experiences can help guide man through the difficult days that lie ahead for this planet. One of which is the present year, which is one of hazards, one of earthquakes, one of volcanoes and tsunamis.
We have lost our great friend and teacher, Dr. Douglas Baker. His entire life was a fulfillment of the occult prophecy that was promised many, many years ago, that there would be 3 waves of teachings that would be given out. And most assuredly, in my observations and in the observations of others, he was a very large part of the 3rd wave of that prophecy. We can be proud that we have known him and that he has influenced us in our lives. I remembered the dream, and I knew the significance of it that I had always felt many, many years before I ever met Douglas Baker, that there was power in movies and cinema, and that we could reach the millions, the masses of people with powerful educational films that would enrich and enhance the consciousness of mankind. And we've done that here at Claregate College, and I'm very proud to have been a small part of that. I am determined to do my part. I know that others here at LE and throughout the world who have known Dr. Baker and who have read his books and been with him and gone to his lectures will continue to be powerfully influenced. I feel his presence with me. I have for many years, and it will continue throughout my life. He had this, obviously, a very natural ability to see into the future and into the past, and he always gave what I feel was the wisdom of Solomon in his guidance to his students, and we are all indebted. His passing is difficult, and yet it opens a door of opportunity for all of us too, to continue in this direction that he has put us on. I believe that the future for Claregate, the future for LE, and for the future of mankind through his efforts and through his students is a very bright future indeed.
Why should we believe in reincarnation at all? Is there a traditional belief in it? It is surprising how many famous people subscribe to the belief that we are reborn again and again and again. Henry Ford, the Henry Ford, he said, "When I was a young man, like so many others, I was bewildered. I found myself asking the question, what are we here for? I found no answer. Without some answer to that question, life is empty, useless." Subsequently, he came into possession of a book on reincarnation. After reading it, Henry Ford said, "It changed my whole life. From emptiness and uselessness, it changed my outlook on life to purpose and meaning. I believe that we are here now and will come back again. Of this I'm sure, that we are here for a purpose, and that we go on and on and on. Mind and memory, they are the eternals. Lloyd George, Prime Minister of Britain during the most vicious years of the First World War, once commented, "My opinion is that we shall be reincarnated, and that hereafter we shall suffer or benefit in accordance with what we have done in this world. For example, the employer who sweats his workpeople, he will be condemned to be sweated himself." Albert Schweitzer, on arriving in America for the first time, was met by a large body of people. He addressed them as follows: "Ladies and gentlemen, in my youth I was a stupid young man. I learned German and French, Latin and Greek, Hebrew, but no English. In my next incarnation, English will be my first language." Most English children of my generation grew up with the poetry of John Masefield, the English poet laureate. His stirring poem, Sea Fever, expresses his thirst for life. "I must down to the seas again, for the call of the running tide is a wild call and a clear call that may not be denied." Masefield believed that the thirst for life is not expunged at the moment of death, that thirst goes on between lives and that we are reborn. I hold that when a person dies, his soul returns again to earth. Arrayed in some new flesh disguise, another mother gives him birth. With sturdier limbs and brighter brain, the old soul takes the road again. Poets were believed to have been visited by the Muses, which means, in language other than the mythological, that they were divinely inspired or informed from the divine levels, from where, as the reincarnationists know, the mechanisms governing rebirth operate. It is quite easy to point to a whole host of poets who through their poetry have indicated their love of this very ancient belief that man's soul is immortal. Certainly we should include amongst them the German poet Goethe, the English poet Tennyson, as well as William Wordsworth, who describes beautifully in his Intimations of Immortality how the young child comes into each incarnation trailing clouds of glory from the heaven world. Our birth is but a sleep and a forgetting. The soul that rises with us, our life's star, has had elsewhere a setting, and cometh from afar. Not an entire forgetfulness, and not an utter nakedness, but trailing clouds of glory do we come from God, who is our home. The American poet Walt Whitman also makes numerous references to rebirth. The author believes that by the end of this 21st century, 50% of the English-speaking peoples everywhere will have accepted the proposition of rebirth. It forms part of his work to lecture extensively on this subject in an endeavor to change the climate of thinking on matters that are esoteric.